Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, deathslice, search peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks, citizens. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And today I want to talk about a dramatic police incident. And I don't generally cover specific events and incidents of police brutality or aberrant behavior. I generally cover these sort of topics in broad strokes, and I'll attach a couple of my videos about the militarization of the police and how police brutality seems to be morphing into police sadism and some of these broader topics. But on occasion I cover a dramatic police event because the implications are a little more broad and a little more interesting and a little more devastating. And this goes in line with a video I did about a year ago about a specific incident. That one was in Cleveland in 2012 and involved 100 police officers, 60 cars, and over 137 rounds being fired off. So needless to say, when you look at the numbers involved, this shows that this is not a problem with rogue cops. This is an entire department. This is an entire culture. So in the Cleveland incident, 100 police officers, a pretty substantial part of the force, 60 cars, and then the fact that you have two people being the targets for over 137 rounds. This shows the use of overwhelming force and almost a certain glee. Makes me think of the death scene in the movie Bonnie and Clyde, where hundreds of rounds are riddling the car and the bodies are jumping around. And so this new incident is the Florida Copapalooza bloodbath, and this occurred in December 2013 and involved 23 officers. So once again, this is a very sizable chunk of the police force, and in this incident, they fired off over 377 rounds into two suspects. So think about that, 377 rounds. And the witnesses described the event where the police stopped the car and they fired 50 rounds in the first volley. And then they asked the suspects to come out of the car and put their hands up. And there was some movement, so they were still alive after the first 50 rounds. And then they immediately unloaded another 327 rounds, and it took 25 seconds. And witnesses said that bullets struck other cars, bullets struck fence posts, bullets struck nearby buildings, and bullets struck other officers. And in fact, the volley was so intense, 2 officers have ruptured eardrums. So this is a pretty devastating event, and it says a lot about police culture at this point. And to caveat, let me say that yes, the one driver was a criminal. He was his name was Adrian Montesano, and apparently he robbed a Walgreens at gunpoint and then shot an officer and stole a police car. So he's definitely a high priority suspect. But the other part of this story is that he went and dropped off the police car, went and got his own car, and picked up a friend of his, an innocent friend. So not only were the 2 suspects unarmed at that point, so it wasn't like the police force unleashed all these rounds because they were receiving fire themselves. No, it was just the suspects. So they're unarmed, and then this unfortunate other person, just because he knew the robber, an innocent, was killed in this devastating attack as well. So this, like I say, brings up a couple of things. One is the fact that the police are interested in protecting themselves and the state. They no longer protect the citizens. So that's an important part of this. And then the second part of this is that it's moral hazard. This kind of behavior, this kind of overwhelming force, this kind of brutality will continue as long as the culture is insular and there are no repercussions. Most cops don't seem to ever face any charges for this lack of judgment. And we see this time and time again, too, this point 3, which is this new era we live in with overwhelming force. And it not only happens in a situation like this where you have over 23 officers show up, but individual incidents, more and more, you're seeing seemingly dozens of cops showing up to subdue one person. So this idea of overwhelming force, and it's a juxtaposition of a lot of things I've talked about in other videos. It's the militarization of the police. It's a culture of violence, and a culture of us and them. And this kind of culture is going to breed this kind of violence. And it also has to do with another aspect of the militarization, and that's the training through Israeli security forces. Police all over the United States are routinely run through the security system in Israel, and exchanges done so that these police can learn anti-terrorism techniques that the Israelis use. But unfortunately, what happens is that they end up, police come back here and adopt a lot of those similar attitudes of a police force that's basically functioning as a domestic occupation force. And now that mentality is brought back to the United States. But that's only one part of the puzzle, so I don't want to overemphasize that. And one of the other factors in this story as well is the idea that a police officer was shot. And so not only was a police officer shot, but we know that the police were looking for an armed suspect. And they can use those two factors to legitimize this incredible overuse of force. And part of it is retribution. And unfortunately, the militarization of the police around the world is causing a lot of this sort of attitude. And unfortunately, it reminds me of World War II, when Nazis would occupy a village, and they would tell the population that if one Nazi soldier, one German soldier was killed, 20 innocent civilians would be executed. And so we see this kind of retribution with overwhelming force, this same concept being used on the streets of the United States now. So anyway, this is seems to be the wave of the future. More and more police brutality incidents we seem to involve dozens and dozens of officers. There always seems to be a small army showing up for anything even remotely legitimate with these SWAT teams. We saw a bombing in Boston, which should have been treated as a crime, but instead was martial law was ushered in, and a small army combed the city. So we're seeing more and more of this kind of behavior, and unfortunately there will be more Copapalooza bloodbaths. And it's just unfortunate that we have a culture now where when police officers get the opportunity to use their revolvers, they seem to use them with a very large amount of gusto. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.